Hey, look, I don't know where you're from tonight or where you're at today when you're watching this video, but we're so glad that you're just taking a moment to check this out. I'm Brent Nussbaum, and I am the men's pastor at Fairhaven Church. And I'm joined today with two people that I really consider friends, one that I've known for a little bit longer than the other. And we are trying to figure out how to run after mission and ministry together. And so why don't you introduce yourselves, guys?
Yeah, hey Brent, good to be with you, man. Thanks for putting this together. My name's Michael Thompson, and we've been friends about a little more than a year, but we've kind of entered into this space of going after the hearts and lives of men and pulling them out of the ditch, getting them to safety. And so I think that made us fast friends in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, it's great to be with you.
Definitely. I agree with that, Brent. Jeff Pinkleton. I am the executive director for the Gathering of the Miami Valley. Our tagline is connecting men to God, and just love any and all opportunities to partner, work together to reach, build, and grow men.
What I think is so cool is in both instances, Jeff, when you and I first met, it was like an instant connection. And Michael is actually an author of a book that we'll get to in a little bit. And I actually met him by having him read me his audiobook. And then I have connected further now and actually have had a chance to really get to know him and his ministry. And really, this is all culminating for an event that's coming up at Southbrook Church and at Fairhaven Church, August 21st and 22nd. And the Gathering has been helping us to promote this. And HOAW Ministries, the ministry that Michael and the Heart of a Warrior book comes out of, is going to be coming up to Dayton from where they're at. So we want you guys to be able to just hear a little bit of their heart, hear a little bit of Jeff's heart and Michael's heart. So Michael, I'm going to ask you some questions here. First of all, how long have you been in vocational ministry? And kind of a secondary question to that, what makes you qualified to speak about the message in your book and kind of the thing that you're running after with men? Let men who don't know who you are and kind of your past a little bit into who you are, if you don't mind.
Okay. Yeah, great question. So played college basketball, and that was an entry point for me after college to step into, I played for a ministry team, a missional basketball team called Athletes in Action. It was a part of Campus Crusade. So I got recruited after college in a smaller Division II school, Central Oklahoma. I got invited to play for Athletes in Action, which I was absolutely thrilled to keep playing. And God, it was part of my story. God kept meeting me in this game and beginning to partner with my heart and for evangelism and discipleship. I mean, Crew was an Athletes in Action were really good fits, good places for me to step into. So I played for 3 seasons. And in those 3 seasons, I really got to know Athletes in Action larger. And there was a day when I asked the national director of the field ministry, hey, would there be a place out there for me and my wife? And so that was probably 1992. And then about 93, they placed us at Duke University. So I had 3 seasons. It was time to retire.
Blue Devils.
The Blue Devils, that's right. And they just won 2 national championships back to back.
No big deal.
Yeah, back in those days.
How many times do you hear people talk to you about Christian Leitner? Do you get Christian Leitner like all the time?
Yeah, the older he gets, the less and less. There's been other teams, there's been other characters, there's been other players, and so our time on Duke's campus, Jeff, we were there about 11 years, and then after that, and we worked with the athletes, kind of like the chaplains was the role that we had in the Duke athletic department, my wife and I, and great time, great season. Brent, we've talked about seminary. So there was a time when I kind of had a bit of an ache, a bit of a desire to explore more. I could do my job, but my heart was getting a little bit distant from that, which is not good when you're in ministry.
Yeah.
So then I signed up for seminary. That took about 5 or 6 years. But in that time frame is when God began to move me off of campus and campus ministry with the athletes and into more community and into particularly men's initiatives. I got a master's in counseling Stayed on staff for about 5 more years. So we all together, my wife and I were on crew staff for about 17 years.
Wow.
And then in that time, got a master's in biblical counseling, had ran into, and what God did significantly was introduced me to a guy named John Eldridge through the book Wild at Heart. And I stepped out into a weekend event with them, their Wild at Heart boot camp. And that was just, so seminary, athletes in action, crew, and then Wild at Heart. That collision really is where God put me and then pulled me from and began to, move me in another direction with my life and with mission and ministry. So it was a couple years later that we started ZOA, and we kind of moved out of the crew environment, which we loved, and yet into something that really fit differently. And it was a lot of pioneering. It was a lot of exploring what God had for us and walking with Him into a very unfamiliar space. And that was 2006. So for the last 13 years, we've been walking and working within this ZOA environment and that ZOA team. And then, Search and Rescue came out in 2011, and then Heart of a Warrior came out in 2015.
Great. Hey, Jeff, I got a few questions for you too, but let me follow up with that, Michael. And the question...
Can I say one quick thing on that, Brent?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is very good for me and informative. I didn't realize that timeline there. And one of the things people encourage me on that speaks way greater to you is you are not a fly by the seat, here today, gone tomorrow. I mean, there's some real endurance and stick-to-itiveness, definitely with AIA, which, I think, Michael, we've talked about.
Yeah.
Brent and I are both close to the folks down there as far as proximity, and I've got great relationships with Mark and some of those guys, and man, just that kind of stick-to-itiveness. And then, man, 13 years in Heart of the Warrior, I didn't even think about that timeline being 9 years after you jumped in. Man, that's highly encouraging to me. That'll speak volumes.
I mean, we literally, Jeff, we literally moved to Montgomery and in that northern Cincinnati. I mean, my wife and I lived there. Athletes in Action moved just before they put us in Xenia.
Yep.
We were getting ready for all that. So my last year with Athletes in Action basketball, we were living in northern Cincinnati, in that area. So then Xenia and Landon and all that space was kind of where we, I got to spend some time right in your guys' backyard before we were shipped off to Durham, North Carolina, and Duke University. But so we've had a little bit. I got a little road wear, like you do. So been at this game for a little while.
I feel like you should be about 80 years old right now. The way you talk about.
Dog years, maybe, I think, if we're up there. Yeah.
Sorry, Brent.
No, that's all good. That's good. It's good. The question I have, though, is for the people that are, watching kind of ZOA, what does ZOA mean? You call that's your ministry, what is ZOA? What does it mean?
Yeah, it was one of the moments that God was working and speaking. I mean, He always is working and speaking, but getting to see more and more of that the more and more I walk with Him. But it was one of those moments where in seminary I was working on a paper, kind of looking at the Greek lexicon, doing some of the word search, stuff like that, and this term came up in John 10:10 that I came that they might have life and have it to the full. And this was about 2003. So there was, again, I described that collision course of a lot of things. So I'm working on this paper and I just loved it. I mean, something, when things, you see them or hear them and they feel like they're bold and italics and underlined in your heart, in the eyes of your heart and the ears of your heart. That was what happened. And this ZOA thing just was so cool to me that the offer of the gospel was a ZOA kind of life. So as I explored that, it was a quality of life. It was a life connected to God with intimacy. I mean, some words, I just loved it. And so I told Robin about that, about this word, this Greek word. I came that they might have ZOA and have it to the full. And shortly after that, because we were just about to transition, about 2004, we were thinking about leaving staff, but where would we go? And some things unfolded there. And so I was looking for something, how you find things. I was looking for something else And I found this C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity. I was looking for something else, but I came across something I had highlighted and underlined years before, and it was about Lewis is talking about in Mere Christianity the difference between a Zoe and a Bios life. And I'm like, C.S. Lewis is stealing my stuff, man. Like, come on. Holy cow. And what he wrote about it was just what God was whispering to me. And it was just God affirming you're on the right track and you're heading in the right direction. And so it just describes the kind of life that I believe we were made for, that we're hopeful for. And in some ways has been very elusive to us. And there's other conversations about why. Yeah. But if the offer of the gospel is more than forgiveness, which I believe it is, the offer of the gospel is life and life to the full. And so that's where Zoe came from.
Good. That's good. Yeah. I love that. Few more questions. Jeff, you jump in wherever. And, if you've got a question to add, I know you had some other thoughts that you wanted to ask or some things you wanted to ask. So when you've got a question, you jump in, Jeff.
Good. But
so specifically now, this is actually going to be for Jeff. And then Michael, I'm going to ask you the same question. So Jeff, to you first. You kind of have come on board this really just trying to say, I want to do what I can to help support this because you believe in men's ministry so much. This is not a gathering thing. Jeff is, like he said, he's the executive director of the gathering. And this is not a gathering thing, but Jeff has a heart for men that he saw what Fairhaven and Southbrook and some other churches in the Dayton area were doing months ago. And he said, you know what, I'm buying into this. I'll at least try to do what I can to bring men together. So Jeff, why do you believe that this message needs to be heard by men?
Well, I think identity is something all men struggle with at the core. And, it's a daily battle. It's an everyday, it's an every moment. It's a every year type of thing. And having met Greg Sailors through you and then Michael through that, there's just they always are talking about partnership and kind of reaching men together and really erring on building relationship. And that's what we got to do. And, people say the number one challenge facing men today is isolation. There's no doubt that's true. So wherever we can hook arms, nobody's plan, nobody's program, nobody's ministry is going to get this job done alone. We got to do it with each other. And I think you and I, for the better part of a year and a half now, have gotten that, Brent. And it's like, what if something's working wherever it is and God's moving? And that's the beauty of where Michael and Greg and these guys are, is they're seeing it from a little bit of a different spot than we are, where God's doing something on a bigger scale.
Yes.
And they keep talking about Dayton and then Miami Valley. It's like, well, man, if they see something that I want to see it from where they see it, let's dive in deep.
Michael, same question to you then. Why do you believe that this message, you guys are coming up, 4 of you guys from Zoe, right, are going to come up. So why do you believe that this message is needed? And again, maybe a secondary question with that is, do you believe that God has kind of orchestrated this divinely for you guys to be coming when you are to Dayton, when Dayton has recently had this shooting?
Yeah. The first question, I agree with you, Jeff. It's been not only my struggle, but friends of mine and other men, as we've been doing this for a while. We love to talk about, and when we come to Dayton, we want to talk about this idea of being an oriented man. And an oriented man is a man who knows who he is. That's your identity, Jeff. Where he is, the larger story that his story is in, and the good that God's up to in his life. And to the degree that a man doesn't know those things would be to the degree that they're disoriented. And you can be, we've just seen it. All of us have seen it enough not only in our own lives, but in the lives around us. Christian men, church men can be very disoriented. And so what is it that's in the way? What is it that's keeping them from the Zoe life, from the fullness and the abundant life that God is offering, that God's promised, and yet so few men are experiencing? And there's an enemy. There's an enemy. That John 10:10, that other part of that passage, Brent, is the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Is that true? Yeah. Is that literal? And how does that look? And so, I think back to, a question that we connected over the book Heart of a Warrior. It struck a nerve in your heart. And I think you guys and your staff at Fairhaven, as well as at Southbrook, have done an incredible job of offering the themes in the book Heart of a Warrior, the invitation of the book Heart of a Warrior and I still love the tagline. I love it. I love when it came out. It wasn't there for the longest time, but working in the editing process, I remember the editor saying, I think that's the subtitle, the tagline. Before you can become the warrior, you have to become the beloved son.
Yeah.
Too many men are getting their tails kicked because the foundation of being loved by God and experiencing that love of God is not withstanding the assault of the enemy.
Yeah.
And the enemy comes, like Jeff said, at your identity. He comes at your identity relentlessly. And so, and when he gets you caged or he gets a man quarantined, he's just kind of okay with that. I mean, that's fine. It's not much more than an electric fence. It's not as the kind of cage that we think of, and it may not even be electric fence. It's kind of, you remember the ditch that would keep the big elephant or giraffe in its pen? Yep. And just the training. What they do is they would tie a rope around that elephant or that giraffe and the stake, and the rope would go right to the edge of where that trough was. Well, the elephant could get across that, but they got trained that that's the end, that's the limit, that's the limitation. And so, our hearts have been so unfortunately trained to some of the limitations rather than the abundance and the fullness and the goodness that is there. And so I love what we're doing. I love that we're having a bigger conversation in Dayton, which honestly, Brent, because of you, Jeff, Frank Crockett, the conversation's already started. It's been going on, and inviting more and more men into that conversation. And as men enter into it and they hear about orientation, they hear about overcoming, they hear about power and authority, men start to, their chest comes up. I've seen it over and over again. Yeah. Their shoulders are back like, wait a minute, there's weapons? Where are they? Yeah. I'm ready. I didn't know where the ammo depot was. I didn't know that I could guard my heart, defend it, and also enter into the battle for the hearts of others, their marriages, their kids.
Yeah.
Those are some of the ingredients of our message. But, it goes back to if you step into this battle without the foundation being secure of who you are as a beloved son of God, and we can tell you to memorize that, but that's not the point.
That's right.
What we're inviting you to do is to experience that. And honestly, that's where my script ends and God's script begins.
Wow.
I cannot orchestrate that for you, but I can, share with you, I think it's over there, or I think it's over here, but for you to seek and knock and ask and pursue that kind of intimacy with God, we're seeing men literally transformed by the love of God, by being loved by God. And that, I think, Jeff, is where we find our greatest common denominator. And with you, Brent, what does it look like to invite men into environments that talk about that so that they could then experience that in their lives? And then there's nothing more fun than a transformed man. He can hardly contain himself. You don't have to do an evangelism class. If you have a good pizza or you watch a good movie, you're going to tell people about that.
Yeah.
When you encounter God, you will tell people about that.
Yes.
And so that's what we're hoping and trusting God to do. But we are trying to create environments like in Dayton coming up next week where men could step into an environment where they might experience and encounter God. And then hopefully an environment that you guys create, because after we leave, what we're hopeful for is tribes, foxholes, outposts, circles of men, whether there's 4, 14 or more, 40, where men can become friends in the kingdom.
Yeah.
I have a lot of friends. I love friendship. I think it's critical to the masculine journey, and it's critical to becoming who you are in the kingdom, you need oriented friends. And that's something that I know it was some of the things that you and I have connected on, Brent. What does it look like to create environments for men to connect with God and with each other?
Yeah.
And I think those are game changers. I've seen them. I've seen that over and over the last 4 years to be game changers.
Yep. Agreed. I should have said this at the top, but yes, we've mentioned Southbrook, and we've said the name Frank Crockett a few times.
Yeah.
But Frank Crockett would have been on this if he was not on vacation. So Frank Crockett.
The brother needs a vacation, man. I mean,
yeah, right. Who needs that?
You too, Brandon. You guys work hard.
He's just going to do it. He's going to buy this time as Bob Goff, his side gig.
Yes, right. But so I should have said it at the top of the interview, but for those of you who are wondering, the Southbrook men's pastor, the guy who's really running after it, Southbrook, and really the reason Fairhaven and I am running after it, and Fairhaven is now running after it, and Jeff and other churches in the Dayton area and Springfield even are going after the heart of a warrior. It's because of Frank Crockett. So I meant to mention this at the beginning of the interview, but Frank would be here in a heartbeat if he could have. He just didn't work with his scheduling. And so, Frank is really the one who spearheaded even this whole idea of this event, Zoe and the Heart of the Warrior guys coming up from Carolina. It's really Frank's spearheading. And I've been able to kind of come behind Frank and his leadership and kind of catch the wave of what I think he started as he caught a vision, what God wanted to do in Dayton. And I've kind of just been able to ride right behind what Frank has done. So that's just a note that I want to make sure I make, because Frank introduced me to the book about a year ago, right around a year ago. And man, my life definitely was changed by reading it. And, Fairhaven, because of that, we were able to get about 18 small groups of men into the book since September. And it's just amazing to see how guys are diving into this, and hearts are really changing. And it's really cool to see when a guy doesn't just intellectually know something of who God is or of scripture, but they can say it from their heart. This is who I know Jesus to be, not just intellectually, but in my heart. And I know in my heart I am a beloved son. It's not just something I can intellectually say, but I know this for a fact, like in my heart of hearts. And that 18-inch journey is one of the hardest and one of the most intense journeys a guy can take, or a woman, but we're talking about men. But I think it is the most profitable journey that a man can take. And so for that, I am just so excited that we get to continue pushing into this when you guys come up here next week. And yeah, that we'll be able to gather men in small groups afterwards and just see this thing multiply, and so it's exciting.
Yeah. I would say that, if we were up to something, that's it. The event, being there at Southbrook, being there at Fairhaven, those are going to be important things, but it's really for after.
Yeah.
It's for what you guys are offering at Fairhaven and what you're offering at the gathering and what you're offering at Southbrook. Where's an environment where a man can say, I'm invited there. I belong there, and to walk with other men, because you guys are a few years into this, and that's what's, you've got guides. You have men who have been into the exploration of their own lives and hearts and restoration, and now they're coming back for other men and saying, hey, I've never guided before, but I think I'll give it a shot. Facilitating groups, mornings or evenings. It's not going to be a schedule or calendar issue, I don't think. You guys seem to have, you're going to put these things all over the week. Yeah. So there's a place for a man to dive into. And I think that's where the hard stuff happens. And that's where the really, really good stuff happens. Like you said, Brent, that the distance closes.
Yeah.
A man needs to be known.
Yes.
Friendship is about being known, your story known, and you knowing the stories of the other men in the circle. And that takes time. And yeah, usually there's a man or two in there that's struggling and maybe, not the guy, not the man that you might gravitate towards, but that's the very man that God's put in that circle to teach you something and to invite you into something. So there's so much more going on in what we are. The Dayton gatherings are huge, but there's so much more going on. And I'm so excited for what will happen after. It's the after that's going to be significant.
Jeff, anything that you want to ask to Michael? Anything that you think would be beneficial for people that would be watching this interview?
No, I just think it's encouraging. For people that, Brent, you're in church world, you're doing men's ministry and other things at Fairhaven, but you can't not bleed for men like you do. Michael's in North Carolina and has much more of a wider scope through the book. Here I am doing what I do in Springfield as a focus, but certainly in the Miami Valley. And we're without saying the exact same words. We're speaking the same language. We really have a heart for men to understand who they are, how God wants to flesh that out in the home, in the workplace, in the community, in church, and whether it's Zoe, Fairhaven, the gathering, whatever. Clearly we're on the same page here with what it means to build men up and see them reach full potential in Christ. And how can you not get excited about that?
Let me just jump in really quick with a question for you, Frank, kind of a follow-up to that. Jeff. Jeff, the question...
He's a little better.
Yeah. No, the question is, with the gathering, kind of, Michael's talking about getting into these pods and these things. And for those who don't know gathering, right, for people who are going to watch this, who really have no idea who the gathering is, Jeff, really quickly, just a brief statement about, you said that what your vision statement is, maybe restate that if you'd like, but how do you run after that vision, and kind of tell a little bit about your locker rooms and some of the things that you're doing to get men into the same thing that Michael was just talking about, those bunker holes and those, ally groups and these ideas of coming together as friends. So just tell a little bit for men who don't know about what you're doing.
I think two things. I like what Michael said about, the relationships being key and guys being known. I think that's huge. Whoever it was, I forgot, someone much wiser than me who said, we all want to love and be loved. We all want to know and be known. And that's true of every man, every person, but men as much as anybody. And I like what you said, Michael, about kind of where you end, and then Christ takes it from there, and the gospel goes beyond what you're saying. And I think, for us, we've been talking a lot lately about who are you pursuing? Who's pursuing you? And I was challenged about a year and a half ago by a friend, or 2.5 years ago, by a friend, Chris Hartenstein, and he challenged me that I wasn't really pursuing my wife. And I was like, here's all the things I know I'm doing well. Yeah. And then the Holy Spirit said, no. That whole thing has helped me out, not just with her, but with guys, and saying, who am I pursuing? Who am I going after? Who's hearing from me on a daily basis? Whose life am I involved in? And, us just building that community and saying, hey, we're going to do life together. You're not going to be alone. Because like Michael said, at any given moment, we're all going through all kinds of crazy stuff. And, what was the old line about, so-and-so has what I don't have. I have what you don't have. And Rob's going to do a whole lot more together.
Yeah.
So small groups is one of the ways we do it. Back to your thing, breakfast outreaches, retreats like we do to Montana, whatever. There's nothing new under the sun. We're just trying to say, what does it take to move the chains with any God to either, another 10 yards closer to Christ or further with Christ.
Yeah. And so I think it's important, though. So if you're watching this video and you don't attend Fairhaven, or you don't attend Southbrook, or maybe you don't even attend Centerville Community, Tim Howeller, who's kind of jumping on and being an ally with us as well, just know that the gathering is based out of Springfield, but he's doing things as far south really now as Beaver Creek, and maybe
we're down in Centerville, definitely, maybe a little Miamisburg, Brookville,
So there's a way for you. Yeah, there's a way to get connected then into this idea of running after relationship with other men, and not to say that the gathering is always doing Heart of the Warrior stuff, or those that will be what that group is doing. But I just want to make sure that men realize, that are maybe going to watch this, that again aren't connected with one of these churches that we've been mentioning, that if they don't have something at their church, or they've been trying to start something and it's been sputtering, I think Jeff is a great resource in the Miami Valley. So, reach out and find them on Facebook, The Gathering. And it's just going to be another great way for us to continue this conversation beyond next week's events on
Well,
Wednesday and
to
Thursday.
your point, that the group that really has jumped on board Heart of a Warrior is a new group that started in Bell Fountain. I had to Google. A friend of mine told me one day they actually looked up the Miami Valley to see where we fit in that whole equation. The Miami Valley technically goes to Lima.
Okay.
So us being Bell Fountain is pretty far north, but I mean, we got stuff going there, and that's the group that's really embraced the Heart of a Warrior big time.
That's awesome.
That's great.
Jeff, if you didn't have anything else for Michael, I didn't know if you had any questions for Jeff or myself before we kind of end this, or.
Yeah. I would love to throw it to you, Brent. Like, just describe a little bit about what you're seeing as central and core to the men's initiative now at Fairhaven, because I know it's gone beyond Heart of a Warrior, but there's been something that's been foundational and helpful rallying around that. But what are you seeing in the church with the hearts of men through Heart of a Warrior? What is it that's moving them to this what do I want to say, the intentionality, the connectedness, and even the personal movement growth that you're seeing in the men at Fairhaven? What would you attribute that to? One or two or three things?
I think it gets back to some of the things that we've already stated, that men are really craving relationship with other men. And so when I put out an invitation, to many men, and an email goes out and I say, hey, kind of here's what we're going to be running after. And I think it ignites something in them that says, I want to go after that. This idea of a warrior and beloved son, and they kind of read some of the little bits and pieces that I wrote, into that email that goes out to them. I think that that's attractive. I think that men really want to be called to a mission. And I think sometimes the church in general doesn't sometimes call us up to what God is asking for, and not to do more, not to be more or give more, just to be a human being, just to experience, as you said, who Jesus is in their own life. And so I think the way that you've, Michael, written some of what you've done in the book and being able to take some of those pieces out, I mean, I'm going to say that one of the things that I think draws the men in is your nothings that you say. And so I don't botch it. What are those nothings that you say?
You've been asked that. What does an oriented man look like? And that was the question that provoked. It would be a man with nothing to hide, nothing to prove, and nothing to fear. And that's what Jesus was. That's what Jesus is.
Yes.
Jesus is like.
Yep.
So the very image that we bear is the very image that he wants to restore in Brent and restore in Jeff, and that, yes, what Jeff said earlier, we're needed in this story.
Yeah.
I'm not like you. I'm not like Jeff, but the way that you bear God's image and the way that Jeff bears God's image together, we bring the image of God into any environment, in any situation, in any moment. And so I think that's the nothings, right? Nothing to hide, nothing to fear, nothing to prove. Yeah. And the more and more settled a man is in his heart, where he doesn't have to strive and he doesn't have to prove, or he isn't afraid to step in. That's the kind of work that takes a little while. Restoration takes a little while, but that's the kind of fruit and that's the kind of results that we're seeing of what the Spirit of God is up to in a man's life, growing him. We call it in the church world sanctification.
Yes.
It is the growing up of me into the very version of God that he created me to be. I'm an image bearer. And I'm not gonna capture all of God's image, clearly, but there's a fingerprint that he's put on me, and that's what I want to be that. And it's the version of Jesus that he's given me, and that he's also inviting me to become. So I think that's exciting. I think that, there were things in the way of that in my life. There still can be. There's a battle. There's a war against that, Brent. And Jeff, you guys know it. You're on the front lines. You see how challenging it is and how easy it can be for men to be taken out. Proverbs 4:23 says, above all else, guard your heart. This is a precious thing. And I had no idea that it was critical to they're the girls. I had no idea that it was critical to the journey.
So just to follow up really quickly, I would say that idea anyway is what drew the guys at Fairhaven in, that idea of, oh man, like I could have nothing to fear. I could have nothing to hide and nothing to prove. Like, what would that look like as a man to be with other men and know that they're going to love me because I'm who God has made me to be. And I'm a beloved son, and getting all that figured out. And then the other idea too, I think that it really draws men in, is this idea that I can be a warrior for something, like that there is a battle going on. And, most men understand it, at least a little bit in the church, the idea that there is a battle. When we say the Ephesians 6 passage, right? Our battle is not against flesh and blood. But I think that just the way that you have written it in the book and explained it, and then for men to get the idea that this is not like just some fly-by verse. Right. This is literally where we're at every single day, right? When we wake up, we are battling. And I think there's something in a man that God made us, right? To be men, to be people who battle, to run into danger. And so, again, that's what I love about everything that's going on with this conversation is,
hey, loving is a dangerous game. Loving is a dangerous thing. To love, to be loved. This is where the enemy is at work in all kinds of ways. And I think you're absolutely right. And it's something that we're stressing. I think a lot of us as Christian men knew that there was a battle. We just didn't know how it worked.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how the enemy lies and how he supplants lies in your heart and your mind about you. Goes back to what Jeff said. When our identities are so compromised because people have gotten a hold of us and said things to us and about us, and the circumstances in our life has somehow spoken, you're too much, you're not enough, you're this, you're that. I mean, those can go deep.
Yes.
And they can have a huge impact. I mean, I'm learning about, I know what happened in Dayton. The nation knows what happened in Dayton. The world knows what happened in Dayton. What would possess a young man to do that? Yeah. And when you understand the enemy, it's not the enemy's fault. But what I want to say for this just one moment is, we don't want to underestimate what the enemy can do to a man, and the effects of that, and the infection of that. That to me, Brent, is the only and best explanation of what would possess, good word, what would possess a man, to do that. Yes. And that there, how evil is evil. When the scriptures talk about the kingdom of darkness, when they talk about the fallen angel and the third of the heaven, this is a part of the conversation that we need to help men with, because if you don't know what you're up against, you're either POW or somehow, some way so compromised. And when we see men start to see what has come at them, that something, like you said, rises up within them like, crap, no more of this shiz. I'm done. I do not want to live under this anymore. And so when they start to come out from under the lies, it's a new day. Yeah. It's a new day in the battle. It's a new day in their families, in their marriages, and love wins. Love wins. And so
what's funny about what you said there, Michael? I was thinking, I don't know if you guys have checked it out yet. I just read the new book by the guy who's running Promise Keepers. His name's Ken Harrison.
Oh yeah, yes.
I love the title of that book, Rise of the Servant Kings.
Mm-hmm.
You think about those three words, rise, servant, and kings, what they entail. Yeah. How is that anything but a beautiful, good thing for everybody? Right. Rising, being servants, being kings, who we are.
Yeah. God's doing something God's doing something. It's happening in Dayton. He's entrusted kingdom seeds to you. You guys are sowing them faithfully in a variety of ways. He's entrusted some kingdom seeds to us. And I feel like I think we're really on the frontier of something very significant. What Promise Keepers was 20 years ago, what Wild at Heart was a decade ago. I think Heart of a Warrior is just part of something.
Yes.
That is happening. Every generation has to discover the gospel for themselves. And these generations of 40s and 50s and 60-year-old men, not saying the 20s and 30s aren't important, but Jeff, there's got to be a certain amount of mileage in those 40s, 50s, and 60-year-olds that they understand what we're talking about.
You just fired me up. I'm turning 50 in 2 months. You just got me excited.
Oh, man. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, those are the men that are wondering, is there more? And those are the men that we are absolutely rallying, at least in Dayton, for those 2 nights to say there's a life of more love, more life, and more freedom. And you can be an oriented man. It's going to take some time, but what the Spirit will do in your life will result in a man with nothing to hide, nothing to prove, nothing to fear.
Can you close better than that, Brent?
No, I don't think so. So I was literally going to say, I mean,
that's the close right there, man.
That is it right there. So we hope that you would join us next Wednesday and Thursday. Wednesday night, 6 o'clock, we're going to have barbecue and some music and cornhole and actually tomahawk throwing. That's it. Yeah, that's at Southbrook. So you want to make sure you come and be a part of it. Look, don't just come alone. Invite a friend or two and just tell them, just say, hey, look, you're coming with me to this event. I know you're free. You're coming with me. And if Wednesday doesn't work for you, this is why we're doing it over 2 nights. It's one night that you come to. You could come to both, but if one night works, come to the one night that works. So Wednesday night, or come on Thursday night, August 22nd at Fairhaven Church, and we're going to have the same kind of setup. We're going to have barbecue. We're going to have tomahawk throwing and cornhole and some live music going on at 6 o'clock. And then right around 7 o'clock, we're going to gather around this idea of running after having nothing to fear, nothing to hide, nothing to prove, being men who are oriented and understanding this larger picture and this larger story that God is putting us into. So we hope that you would be a part of it, and we can't wait to see you guys.
It's going to be great. Looking forward to being with you, men.